May I have a motion that the closed meeting be closed and that the board certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting to which this certification applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Edwards. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now, if you'll all stand with me and for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I believe we have some recommendations, or excuse me, recognitions.
Yes, sir. I believe Dr. Scales is ready to go with us on our recognitions for the evening of our, we have 2 months' worth of recognitions because the October meeting was interrupted.
Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here. And also, we've got all the ladies are representing us this month. So that's actually a wonderful news for the schools. For the month of October, first, I want to start off with the senior from Parkview High School. Can I have Deanna Elaine Defferball at this time? Come on up. Stand right there. Deanna, again, is a Parkview High School senior, and she's the daughter of Thomas and Paul Vigilante, and she has 2 sisters, Courtney, 23, and Adriana, who is 12. Deanna is a quiet, well-mannered young lady with her priorities straight. She's serving as the highest-ranking cadet in the Air Force JROTC program as a second lieutenant and as the cadet commander, leading over 100 cadets in the program. She's also in her 3rd year of being a stage manager for the Parkview High School Drama Club. Deanna is a hardworking young lady who has a 4.36 GPA and is on the track team, for earning her advanced diploma. Because of her leadership traits, she has served as a junior marshal last year. In the community, Deanna volunteers at the Bread Box, the Clarksville SPCA, and is involved in the Halo and Angel Tree programs. Also, she's working with You Are Not Alone Day. She also works as a customer service representative at Domino's. In her spare time, Deanna enjoys reading, listening to music, spending time with family and friends, and after graduating from Parkview High School, Deanna plans to enter the intelligence branch of the United States Air Force to possibly get a government job as an accountant in the future after high school. Deanna. Congratulations. Stay over here and get your food. You want, dog wants that.
Excuse me.
Give her a round of applause. The other student from Bluestone tonight, she's not here. I'll go ahead and read her recognition. She's actually at an ACE match for the James River District, so I'll go ahead and read it anyway. The October student for Senior of the Month is Madison Taylor Tang Yancey. Madison is the daughter of Mrs. Angela Yancey and the late Stanley Yancey of Clarksville, Virginia. She currently has a 4.39 GPA. Madison is a candidate for her associate's degree from Southside Virginia Community College and will be obtaining her advanced diploma in May 2019. Madison is a conscientious student who always strives to do her best. She is a very active student as she is a member of the Beta Club, Spanish Club, Chess Club, and Student Council. Right now in the Student Council, she serves as its vice president. She is also the drum major for the Bluestone High School Marching Barons and who recently won the drum major category at the Celtic Classic. She exhibits her leadership role in the band and maintains the respect of the members of the band. Outside of school, Madison stays busy. She is the treasurer of the Mecklenburg Junior Women's Association and involves herself with youth activities at Union Chapel Baptist Church. Madison wants to major in neuroscience and hopes to become a neurosurgeon and would like to attend the University of Virginia or the College of William and Mary. Once again, that's for Madison Tang Yancey. Give her a round of applause. Now for the month of November. From Bluestone High School, I'd like to bring up Malaysia Samaje Richardson. Malaysia is a Bluestone High School senior, and she lives with her mother, Ms. Melissa Reed, and her grandmother, Ms. Martha Richardson, in Boyden. She is a determined young lady who works hard in all of her classes. And backing up one thing, her father is also here tonight, so thank you for coming. Malaysia is in her second year of the Air Force JROTC as a cadet. She takes pride in being a cadet as the class allows her to excel in different leadership roles as a rifle exhibition team member and cadet officer. She is a founding member of the Kitty Hawk Air Society, which is the academic honor society for the Air Force JROTC. Malaysia attends Bethlehem Baptist Church, where she is a member of the youth group and the junior ushers. In May 2019, she will be attaining her advanced diploma and plans to attend North Carolina A&T in major in criminology or criminal justice, where she plans to enlist in the United States Army Reserves and attend law school after college. And I do want to let you know that on tomorrow morning, she'll be heading to MEPS to get enlisted to the military for the Army Reserves tomorrow morning. So the administration and faculty and staff of Bluestone High School are excited about Malaysia as she represents their school very well, and she'll be doing great things in the world after graduating from high school and will make Mecklenburg County proud. Again, Malaysia Richardson. My next recognition from Parkview High School is Danielle Elizabeth Green. Come on forward. Danielle is the November Senior of the Month for Parkview High School, and she is the daughter of Pamela Green and has an older sister, Maylee. Danny has always been around Parkview High School smiling, because her smile is contagious, and assisting anyone that she can help. At Parkview High School, she is also a very involved student. She's on the girls' soccer team where she's the captain, the Key Club activity director, the Beta Club secretary, the FCA president, the volleyball team manager, the Marching Dragons drum major, a member of the Spanish club, and the prom committee. Even with all this involvement, Danny is a hardworking student who has a 4.32 GPA and is slated to receive her associate's degree in May. She served as a junior marshal last year at graduation. In the community, Danny is a member of the Impact Church of God youth group and the Shine Club, Shine Girls. She works weekends at Top This Pizza and enjoys working out in the gym and pick up soccer games. Upon graduating from Parkview, she plans to attend George Mason University and majoring in nursing with a future goal of becoming a nurse practitioner in family medicine or oncology. Once again, Danielle Green. Thank you very much. Great job, ladies, to all of you. Thank you.
Wait.
Dr. Scales, we'd like all three of them to come back up so that the board members can have a chance to congratulate them.
Superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you very much. We have quite a few very interesting items to bring to the board's attention and the public's attention tonight. I think you're going to find it very entertaining. I'd like to start by wishing all of the board members an early happy Thanksgiving as we enter into the holiday season. And we are very pleased that we have this time. It's been some busy weeks leading up to it. Busy enough that the first item on the agenda is going to have to postpone, but we are very excited to ask Mr. Joe Lombardino to come up, as we've had the privilege of the Coast Guard Auxiliary offering boating classes to our students so far at Parkview, soon to be at Bluestone. This is the first, I understand, in the nation, and we are very excited, living on the lakes as we do, to have these boating classes offered. And so we have been pleased to work with him, and I'm going to let him tell us about the classes and where we're going to go from here.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for letting us go to the Parkview and Bluestone to give this class. From what we understand, it's about the first one in the country that the auxiliary is going straight to the schools. It's a pilot program as we can see it, and we hope to expand this thing across the country. We did Parkview. We had 60-something students. We had 47 or 48 pass, which from what I'm told is a good average. We start Bluestone on the 26th of the month, which is next Monday. That goes for 5 days, 4 days, and 1 day testing. We have, I think, around 50 students between the two classes there. And this is just for this year. The coaches that we're working with from the PE classes are working on the schedules for next year, and we like to keep this going every year, hitting the juniors and seniors if we can. Our main goal on the water and as Coast Guard Auxiliary is safety. And a lot of teenagers are drowning on these lakes from one reason or another. So I've been trying to do this for 5 years. I've talked to Glenn and some other people. I've talked to teachers. We finally hit a teacher that got us to Mr. Nichols, and he was glad to have us do it. Kent Hobbs is the instructor for the class. One of the instructors, he's the senior instructor. I'm just the administrator or the guy that runs around doing it, and I'm glad to do it. What we'd like to do next in the school system is to get the elementary school kids into water safety classes, but we have to find somebody that can do some animated computer stuff for us so they keep interested in it. And we'd like for this to go on as much as we can. I'm going to Vance County to see the principal there to start a class hopefully next year. And then Warren County. Those are the 3 counties that our flotilla takes care of. After that, it would be up to the other flotillas in our division, which I talked to last Thursday, and they're interested in doing it. I have already, somebody told me I'm getting a contact from Division 26, which is north of us in North Carolina, south of us in North Carolina, and give them a heads up on how to get started and what to do. We had a $1,000 donation from the Ruritans with matching funds from the school system to buy the books. We bought 100 books, 50 for each school. We have some money on the side to replace the books in the near future, and hopefully it'll go on. Now we found that some of the teachers want to get together and want us to give them a class. They didn't know we had these classes, so I think Coach Hutchison is working on something like that. There was no charge to the school except for them to help buy the books.
Yes.
And if you have, Kent Hobbs can tell you about the teaching end of it, and I'll give the floor to him. Anybody have any questions for me?
I just have is this the type of class that leads to a boating license?
Yes.
I mean, so when they finish, they'll take an exam and they would be licensed to boat?
They took the exam. We gave them, Monday or Tuesday after the holiday, I dropped off the laminated cards for each of the children or the kids that pass the test.
And how old do they have to be to get a boating license? There's
As
no
long
age
as they
limit?
can take a test.
Okay. So you
So
can
we
boat,
had
an
juniors,
8-year-old
we-
can boat around the lake and,
Well, they can, at 14, they can use a boat,
okay, 14.
and with some supervision, and at 14, they can use a jet ski, too. So, and this is what, we just want them, kids have died on jet skis and on boats, and we just can't see that anymore. And this was my main thing for the last 5 years, and I'm glad and thank you very much for letting us do it at Parkview and Bluestone. Any other questions?
During which class was it during the PE class?
Yes.
That you pulled them
Yeah, it
to do
was-
that?
The way the schools are, it's not the one I went to school, but they were blocks or something, Block 1 and Block 3, I think, or Block 2 and Block 3.
Right?
And they didn't have to take it if they didn't want to. Some of them had taken it prior to and paid to take it. So we had some students that weren't really up to wanting to take it. We had to keep waking them up. But other than that, it worked out fine for us. And we were happy, and I guess the school was happy, and I hope that you're all happy with it. And if you have any time that you need to have any questions on it, just let us know.
So is your curriculum similar to the online course that people can take then?
Similar, but it's an open forum with us. The kids can ask questions while we're talking. They could, interact with things that we do. So we've had people taking it on the computer, not in classes, but adults, and have taken it with us, and they say it's better to have it in a classroom setting
Okay.
where it's open. And what we charged at that time was, at this time now, is $30, and they charge the same thing on the computer, just about.
And who's the contact person at the school? If it's somebody's interested in taking that, who do they talk to?
They can talk to me, or they can talk.
Well, how do they get in touch with you?
By phone. I'll give you my number.
We have had teachers that have been giving guidance at the school system for that. Our earth science teacher, his name's not going to come to me. Mr. Guzman at Parkview has been the one I know that has been the touchstone
Okay.
for it. I'm not
Yeah,
really
he's
sure who
been
it
my
was.
contact,
Yes.
other than
Okay.
Mr. Nichols, but
I just want to thank you all. I had the opportunity to work as a part-time park ranger for about 30-some years, and we've had the experience of pulling too many youngsters out of the lake that had drowned. And with as much water as we have around us here in our school system, I think it is well planned, and I compliment you guys on it. I just wish that it had been in a little bit earlier.
Well, I
But,
tell you,
now it's not too late.
right, it took me 4 years to get to this point.
I can imagine.
I mean, it wasn't a steady thing because the superintendent changed, the teachers that were working with us left, and finally, Mr. Guzman, who called me just to get a replacement card on his boating safety, got me to this point, and I'm so glad he did. And now we worked with Coach Hutchinson, and now we're working with, I call him Big John, the coach at Bluestone. He's a big guy.
I have a question. You did this through the PE, and I think it might have to be either the principal or superintendent. What about the older kids, the ones that do not take PE? Are they allowed to come
Anybody.
in to take it, or,
They're allowed to take it through us. It's whatever the school system
that's
wants.
what I'm saying.
Ms. Swain?
I think Ms. Swain has it.
We did it, it was offered for our upper level PE classes, so our juniors got to our seniors signed up first if they were in the weightlifting or in the strength and conditioning, so it was not for our freshmen and sophomores, everybody takes PE, it was for our upper levels who were already in it. So all the seniors got an opportunity to sign up first, and if the slots were full, then it went to the juniors that were in those classes. So it was for our older students, like you said, because he wants to keep coming every year, so we want to make it more available for those students.
Yeah, so this will move up every year. We had one boy, I think he said he was 15 or 14. I don't know where he came from, but he was in the class, so it didn't matter to us who was taking it, as long as they were there,
Yeah.
And if we saved one life out of the 60 kids, we would be very happy, because
Well-
it happens too often. I don't know, there's something in this lake that holds these kids down when they fall in the water, because they don't come back up.
No salt.
One comment, Joe. With our new sport, the fishing teams that we have, I know that the the Mecklenburg High School Anglers, I know he's requiring that they have your course before they get on the team, and I think both teams are doing that.
Well-
In case the captain of the boat, you've got two teenagers on the boat, two high school kids, and if the captain had a heart attack or something down the lake, the kid has to be able to bring that boat and bring that captain back.
That's right.
And so it's really beneficial. What you're doing is great. It's really helping everybody.
And we could put some emphasis on a separate class with the fishing class, if that's what the school wants us to do. I don't know if any of them were in our class. I don't know who's in the fishing.
If they're riding a boat right now, they've taken it.
They've taken it,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's one of the important things, is what we call next in command.
Right.
If somebody has a heart attack or has a sunstroke, somebody has to know how to use that boat. And we try to tell them in the class, know where you go in, know where you got to go back to. We've had people die on the water where guy had a heart attack, his wife got on the telephone, called 911. She didn't get nobody in Mecklenburg. She got somebody in North Carolina. Where'd you come in? I don't know. You know, and it's important, and this is what we try to stress. Know where you are, have a plan, do it the way it should be done, and save a life. Anything else? You want anything from the instructor? Thank you.
If he wants to add something.
Thank you very much. This is Lake Country, so we are very pleased to have this opportunity with the Coast Guard Auxiliary to work with us on this. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we're going to have some presentation from the Cardinal Career Counseling team of Jan and Pam, who you will remember my mentioning earlier in the year. We've been working with the Southern Virginia Higher Education Foundation on making some critical connections with our students and with business and industry. Those of us that were at the school board conference saw program after program about the importance of the career literacy piece. We're thrilled to have them on board by their support, and they want to give a presentation tonight on that program.
Good evening, members of the school board, Superintendent Nichols, and the community members. We are happy to be here with you this evening. We just want to introduce ourselves, our company, and our program, Ready for Work, which is career development. My name is Pam Donovan, and this is my partner, Jan Hertz, and we are nationally credentialed certified career development facilitators with over 26 years in experience in K-12 education, and we are excited to be working with students in Mecklenburg County. With the new profile of a Virginia graduate requirements from the Virginia Department of Education, we have aligned our Ready for Work program with the career readiness guidelines from state legislation.
This is our program, Ready for Work. Ready for Work is geared to increase career awareness and boost employability skills. These employability skills, such as soft skills, include time management, social skills, looking people in the eye, interview skills, critical thinking, and perseverance. Ready for Work partners with industry, businesses and education, both K-12 and higher education, to develop a pipeline of skilled workers. Ready for Work also connects students to careers based on local needs and student skills. And this is an innovative regional career project that was developed by the 3 superintendents. This is actually a picture of us doing a field trip for the counselors. This is Don Hackney, and this is in the mechatronics lab. This is the CTA of the Southern Virginia Higher Ed Center.
Whether it be a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree, a state certification, or credential, as career facilitators, we're going to help students by assessing their interest and matching them to potential career pathways. We're going to also guide them through researching several careers that match their interest and skills. We're going to show them how to set short and long-term goals directly related to the results of their assessments and the research they do on careers. And we're going to help them complete an action plan to help them accomplish their career goals so that they can add it to their existing digital platform.
Okay, so we envision our program, the Ready for Work, being a bridge between K-12 and industry. So we would like to look at the skills and the interests of the student individually and actually match them to what the industry needs are and what the opportunities are regionally. So in the 3 counties, we can look at where the student lives, what their interests and skills are, and what the industry needs are, and what programs the industry provides.
Okay, so just basically giving an overview of the program. We're preparing Southside Virginia students to be ready for work. Taking a look at our curriculum, Ready for Work curriculum, aligning it with the state legislation, looking at the interest assessments, the results, connecting them to career pathways, working with them to set goals, mentoring. We're planning a very large regional career summit at the Southern Virginia Higher Ed Center. We'll tell you more about that in a minute. Also, our curriculum is directly connected to industry needs. So it's industry-led. If you look at labor market statistics or encouraging students to look at labor market statistics, connecting them with internships, job shadowing, apprenticeships, and then also keeping in mind, in addition to 4-year and 2-year degrees, state credentials and certifications. And then, of course, we want to take a look at how the program did and how we will measure the success. And we can take a look at some of the things there to include credentials earned, certification earned, and of course the growth, overall growth of industry and local job market and economy growth.
So we have developed a planning committee to work on the Ready for Work Career Regional Summit. We envision that local industries in 3 counties will come to this summit and be in the parking lot with hands-on activities so that the students and parents and all the stakeholders can go to each booth or
Setup.
station and actually decide or figure out what they're interested in. Like the nursing with the nursing program, we're talking about bringing like an arm or some instruments. So we're planning for this to be on March 27th. We're planning to have a day or part of the day for students and then part of the evening for parents.
So you can help us by following us on Facebook. We also have Twitter and Instagram. But you can take a look at what we have posted on Facebook and follow it, share it, like it. You can also help us make some connections. We left you with one of our business cards. So we want to get a good representation of the industries that are in our local area of the 3 counties, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and Halifax, and have those industries come in and set up for this career expo. So if you have industry, maybe you own an industry, a business yourself, or you have connections to business owners, if you could have them, our email is on our card, you can connect us with those people. And also, if you'd like to volunteer, safety is number 1. So we want to keep our students safe while they're exploring their careers. And with this being in a parking lot and having students bust in and exploring careers, we're going to be asking for a few volunteers as well.
Okay, so we all know that rural students face different challenges than their urban counterparts. Partnering with Mecklenburg and adjacent counties and industries in an innovative way to provide career development and will be part of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I just have one.
Sure.
The March 27th event, what age group are you targeting to attend that?
This year, since this is a fairly new program, we thought we would try to capture the ones that are to the upperclassmen. So definitely the 11th graders. And then usually around March, you have some seniors who can't quite or haven't quite figured out what they're going to do. Maybe they didn't get accepted into their first choice college, or maybe they've just changed their mind. I just know, my own children kind of went through that a little bit. So we feel like we will target the 11th graders, all of those, and then seniors who are interested.
Right now, we're targeting 10th graders for the CTA program.
The Career Tech Academy.
The board will remember that this year's 9th graders are the ones that are working under the auspices of the new graduation requirements. So we've been working on these programs for all of the 9th graders and below, but we don't want to lose students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade from options of this type. And there are some very good opportunities. You also know from the VSBA meeting and from other legislative issues that we've talked about that there's great concern at the state level about the counselors and the counselor-student ratios and how do we get information into the hands of all the students and the need not only for career literacy but for some of the student safety issues. Having the opportunity for the Cardinals Nest program, working with their children, as well as the GRASP for financial aid, as well as the career counselors and the new emphasis that they're getting from the community college, helps our counselors, helps our students all the way around. So we're very thankful to have this opportunity, and I'm sure it's going to prove to be very beneficial, not only for the school system, but for economic development and for the businesses, because as we've all spoken about tonight, businesses are screaming for workers. And what does it take to get credentialed, to get prepared? What is it that they need to know as far as the soft skills are concerned? All of that is a big part of what they're going to be sharing with the students and trying even more to help the business and industry see what is it that you need to tell these students that they need to be prepared to do to come to work for you. That's a huge question. So they're working at it from both ends and have the freedom, as they're not in our schools directly, to get out into the business community and help with that. Yes, ma'am.
So for the March event then, if you're a senior and you're not real sure, would you encourage them to bring a resume with maybe certifications that they have earned or will earn to potential employers there?
They could do that. There will be potential employers there, so.
Being proactive like that is,
Thank you.
I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but I know that Gary Cyphers and I have had more conversations related to this and our spring career program that we have each year. And our goal for this year is to have it set up so that employers will be there as well, and we'll be able to recognize students that have made a commitment to a job or an apprenticeship or something that moves on, even as we would with an athlete that's been recruited into a college or someone who signed up for the university, and we recognize them for doing that as a way of highlighting the importance of moving into the programs that are available with the good, typically good funding that goes along with them. So this will be another place for those students to be able to share that information. Yes.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to
Thank
working
you.
with you.
We are as well.
Okay. Now the board gets to have a very good time with a program that might be a little bit unusual. We have our ITRTs that are going to be giving you a demonstration of virtual reality and augmented reality with the glasses that we have, and they're going to use you as guinea pigs for this. So welcome them and let them take us on a virtual trip.
Good evening, school board members and special guests. Well, y'all are special to me, but my name's Jason Winter, and I'm joined by Ramona Tomko and Crystal Elmore. We are all ITRTs here in the county, and are very excited that over the past summer, all schools were able to get a set of Google Expeditions. Now, the version that we have before you today can not only do virtual reality, but can do augmented reality. Now, virtual reality, and you may have seen this TV or different things where you're looking within goggles, but you have a 360-degree experience. Augmented reality is a second thing we're going to demonstrate, where a three-dimensional object can be placed in front of you through your perspective, but it's like it is existing in that space. So you could, just like this microphone standing right in front of me, I'd be able to walk around it and see it. Both really good experiences. The technology is just amazing. There are about over 600 different expeditions right now that teachers can draw from in their classes. And all in all, it provides an immersive experience, one that is multi-sensory, and ends up being very engaging. our teachers so far that have done this, we've been able to reward them, 2 professional development points. So, I mean, that's also an incentive in adding this to their classroom. And all in all, like we're going to a rainforest today, that's a very difficult trip for many of our students to make. But, these things allow them to experience places they may not normally be able to go. So,
Ready?
yeah.
Okay, so tonight we're going to pretend like we're third graders and we're going on an expedition into the rainforest. As a teacher, I have a tablet that allows me to guide you along. It gives me some information at the top, and I'll do you like I do my students. You got to put a pen for right now, and you got to listen.
Busted.
There are 3 things that we have to go over. First of all, you're going to stay in your seat. Second of all, you're going to hold them with both hands. And the third thing is, if it bothers you a little bit, if you feel dizzy, you just put them down and just take a break for a few minutes, and then you can pick them back up and try again. Crystal has suggested with her children, with her students, when she uses it, that she will let them open the goggles and just look from not using them up close to your face, just holding them down. Okay, so the tablet allows me as a teacher, it gives me information, it gives me 3 levels of questions that I can use with my students, and it also allows me to zero in. If there's something that I want to call your attention to, then I just hold down the button and it will guide you. You'll see white arrows to guide you to where I want you to look. Okay, so I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to give you a few minutes to ooh and ah, because that's what our students do. So if you'll hold them up. If you have glasses on, you may want to take them off. It just depends on what works best for you.
I have to shut one eye because of my eyesight, so.
Okay, so we're standing
have
in the
to close one
rainforest
eye.
and
It's
we're
just up to
staring
you.
at a reticulated python. Its baby only is 2 meters long, and when it's fully grown, it might reach a length of 6.5 meters and weigh about 7.75 kilograms. So you should be looking around to see if you can find the python. If you can't, I'll mark it on the tablet, and you should see the white arrows that are pointing you. Everybody see it?
He's behind me.
Are you following the arrows? You may have to move your head around so you follow the arrows. You gotta keep up and moving, so I'm ready. All right, we're gonna switch gears and go to one more scene. This one is gonna be the rhinoceros beetle. All right, so go ahead and look around and see if you can find the rhinoceros beetle. And then, of course, as the teacher, if you were getting a little loud or a little rowdy, then I could just pause it.
Oh, there you
grab
go.
your attention, pull you back in, and then start it up again.
Oh, I see. He's on a
I'll
branch.
point to it right now. Now you know why it's called the rhinoceros beetle.
I went back to the snake.
Also on the tablet, it shows these little smiley faces that lets me see where my students are looking on their in their glasses.
This is gonna make me dizzy.
All right, so we're going to switch now. That's basically what we do with the elementary students. You mentioned there are like 600 different expeditions that teachers can use in their classroom. I'm going to turn it over to Crystal now, and she's going to do the augmented reality.
How about a roller coaster ride?
They're all still.
That's what all the students say.
A roller coaster ride.
So as, Jason pointed out, we do have augmented reality, which is kind of like the step up now. But in order to do that, we do have selfie sticks. We have done that with one classroom, but it's just as well to do it a little bit safer in the goggles. So what you're gonna have to do is hit the silver button on the top right-hand corner, and you're gonna kind of have to open the face. So it's gonna open up. There you go. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Yeah, we can go ahead and hit start. So you're going to have to actually get up out of your seats for this one, and you're going to have to find one of these markers. There is a marker right here. There are two on the floor. There's one on the tabletop. Here's the tabletop and one in the middle. So just find a marker, and you're going to go kind of close to it.
Do you have enough for everybody, or do we share?
You can share. Yeah, you can share. So what you should be able to do is to take your phone and scan above the marker. And what we're looking at right now is a tornado. Okay? And when you're looking, take your phone and you can go under it. You can move your phone down inside of it. Get close to the floor.
You gotta tell us if you can turn you on.
Okay?
Yeah, I bet.
I'm going to go ahead and change it, and we'll look at a hurricane. Yep. So the hurricane should have come up. You should just have to rescan it. Notice you can get on top of it, and you can see the eye. You can almost kind of go down in it. Go under it as well. It is really neat. Okay.
There's Uncle Bill's house.
All right, I'm going to stop you for 1 minute. We're going to do one more. You can leave them open. We're going to do one more augmented reality. Uh-oh.
That's it.
Okay. Ready? All right. So we are going to talk about the ancient Egyptians and how they embalmed or preserved their corpses for burial. Okay? So you need to find a marker and scan it, and then you can step back and you see the mummy. Might have to read things.
But he's sitting right on the other side.
Look at it one time. Focus on it one time. Move around. Okay. This is supposed to teach them.
It was out. Everybody knew. Hey, how's it going?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And members of the board, following up on augmented reality, we have Mr. Jeffers going to give us an update on our drug testing.
That's a terrible segue. Good evening, Chair Ritchie and members of the school board. Superintendent Nichols, as last board meeting, the board directed us to go back and look at some policy and come back to this board with some policy with the recommendations looking at random drug testing for our students, particularly student athletes. In your board packet, you had a fairly lengthy document. And what I would like to do tonight is I'm here to ask for a little bit of guidance and help, and maybe even request a subcommittee of 1 or 2 of you or 3 of you or 9 of you that might want to get together and answer some kind of, think about this with me and go through this and make some decisions. Just I'll go real quickly, back in the 90s into the early 2000s, there have been a number of legal rulings that certainly established the right for school boards to randomly drug test students. In those, after 2002, there was a case that I guess got quite a bit of attention, and Virginia, the General Assembly directed the State School Board Association, or the Board of Education, to draft guidelines for random drug testing. And so when you asked me to go look at what policy and bring back a policy, I went to those guidelines that were developed, and my goal has been to create a policy that would protect this board and the school division according to those guidelines. So when you look at the pieces that are there, and if you have the hard copy or if you have the electronic version, you can take a quick look, and I'll just kind of run through some of the highlights with you. To create a good policy for this, as I read it, we needed to modify a couple of policies, and we needed to create 2 policies. So the modification would be for the standard of student conduct, which is JFC 29, because, and you notice in the document, I kind of put them in red, say this is a new policy or this is a revised policy, and I have some strike-throughs in there and some red print. So when you look at those, for instance, in the relevant portion for the use and possession of alcohol, you see inserted language that says student athletes from grade 6 through 12 must complete a pledge form, reference the pledge, and submit to random drug testing in order to participate in extracurricular sports, and the consequences therefrom. The policy that was also need to be modified, JFCF, drugs in school. And when the interesting thing doing the homework on this and looking around the schools that had such policies, it seems there was a group of school systems that used something called the pledge, and Mecklenburg County was one of those. And some of them are still using a version of that pledge. And that turns out, when I was looking at it, that pledge was created before the guidelines were established by the Department of Education. And so all the pieces that need to be in there are in the proposed policy. So if you flip over to the portion that says Student Athlete Substance Abuse Policy, New Policy Regulation, you will see it perfectly follows the recommended guidelines of the Board of Education. It has a section clearly defining the school board's purpose and intent in this policy. It defines key words, required words that are to be defined. It prescribes exactly how the testing will occur. Oops, if I can flip the page. The requirements, the interaction that this policy has with other policies of the division, and then it spells out the procedures, the selection process, how you can suspicion drug test, and also the consequences and the appeal process. So this policy, the draft policy here, is a pretty complete policy, and the guidance I need from you is, well, I guess a couple of things. Number one, there's a lot of meat to this that's worth spending some time to go through. We could do it at a board meeting. We could do it in a subcommittee and have a recommendation come back. That'd be, of course, your pleasure. But there's a few pieces in particular I would ask your guidance on. when you read through this, this is geared specifically toward extracurricular athletes. Previously, the previous policy referred to privilege, and we have to really think about what does it mean, which students does this policy mean to interact with? For instance, extracurricular athletes, pretty clean group. We have a master eligibility list for VHSL. That list becomes pretty easy. But then you think about the band, students in band. Okay, well, band is a co-curricular sport or activity. And if I, by this policy, was removed from the band, that could negatively impact my grade. And we're not allowed to negatively impact grades or otherwise negatively impact students. This cannot be a discipline consequence. This can't be reported to police. The guidelines that we have here.
Say that part again.
A
Negative-
policy, you can't, so something such as band, which is a co-curricular, I'm in band, so I receive a grade on my report card for band. If I was found guilty, if the board said, well, we want to test band students. Well, a band student, you test them and you found they're positive. They have consequences, they removed from the band. You have now impacted that student's grades because they're not able to participate in band performances, and that's a significant portion of their grade. It's a performance grade. So how do we treat groups like that? Are there clubs that require, in order to be in certain classes, maybe something like a DECA club or FBLA, as a part of those students' class, are they required to be in DECA? If they're required to be in DECA to be in the class, would you test DECA students or FBLA students or FFA students? So there's some questions that come up there. Who do we want to necessarily impact? The cleanest group are certainly extracurricular sports. Student drivers, another pretty clean group that you could interact with. But those are the kind of questions I would like for you all to kind of think about. We could do it now, or we could think about it later. Who would we actually want to impact here, and are we going to be good in that process?
Where did this policy come from?
This is a combination of the policies of multiple divisions within Virginia.
Who put it together?
I did.
So does any divisions already have a standard policy that they've
Nope.
taken through their legal and their attorneys have said this is a good policy?
Well, I can answer the first part. Yes, divisions have some policies in place, but I couldn't attest to whether or not they have been reviewed that way.
No matter what policy we have when it comes to this, it's going to have to be reviewed by our attorney.
Absolutely.
But you're asking the board members to look at it right now and give you guidance?
Yes, sir.
And then it's going to be reviewed by our attorney?
Absolutely. Yeah, this should not be normal procedure. If you were to say, hey, we love this thing, let's move tonight, your normal procedure would have a reading and then an adoption. And I wouldn't want you to do that tonight. You would want to spend some time with this, and I'm asking for some feedback on a couple of key issues by a subcommittee or the full board. And then we would take those revisions based on that subcommittee or the divisions of the big group to our attorney and say, here's what we're considering as our policy. Is this good? Is it clean?
Have you ever found the last policy that we have?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How is that policy that was reviewed by our attorney differ from the one that you put together?
It doesn't meet the requirements of the Department of Education's stipulations in 2004.
So the attorney approved one that didn't meet the...
I wasn't here, but all I know is that this one that's before you would meet those requirements. But we need some guidance from the school board as to who we want to test. And the other big piece is what type of testing. In the past, I think it was a saliva test. If you want to be accurate with it, you're probably going to use a urine test rather than a saliva test. There's a lot of pros and cons to those two pieces, and so I think that's another point of discussion we want to have.
Are you going to be making a recommendation to us to consider, or do you want the board to go through a work group with you and talk about different ideas to come up with a plan?
Well, that's what I'm asking. is
Maybe
that
we
have
can
a work
delegate
group.
this to the safety committee?
Yes, safety committee would be outstanding.
And we could give, then other board members that have an interest can give recommendations, is it to the safety committee, and the safety committee could make recommendations? That's
Yep.
Mr. John, is that Mr. Johnson, Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So if we have anything we want to add, just contact them and then they'll
I think that would probably be
Yeah, instead of
the easiest work through this
asking
safety.
the board to look at it as a whole
Right.
on the spot, which is going to have to be reviewed by our attorney anyway.
Absolutely.
And this is a policy that you've put together to make one policy for us.
Yes, sir.
This is what you've
This
done.
modifies two policies, modifies three policies and creates two new policies.
So, one question. So if any deterrent against drugs affects a child's grade, we're prohibited from using that?
That is correct.
That makes no sense. I mean, that makes no sense. In other words,
So the random drug policy testing. Now, if you catch a student, I just wrote,
Okay.
sorry, Drew. If a student is found high on THC tomorrow in school,
Yeah,
normal policy of the school board kicks in that says the student is under the influence of drugs, alcohol, other paraphernalia, and all the normal things kick in there, suspension, recommendation for panel, all those kind of things kick in.
Okay.
This only pertains to from the random student drug testing may not negatively impact a student's grades or and it cannot be reported to police. It is not to be reported to police.
And that's the way the current policy is. There's no suspension that goes along with it. There's no
Yeah, it's only
school
suspension from.
so there's no
That's right.
deterrent from using drugs as long as you're not playing sports.
That's correct.
Well,
That
if you
makes-
got, if you got caught high at school, then you can get suspended. There is.
But if you don't get caught, you can be high all the time, right?
Yeah, if you don't get caught. But that
That,
would,
that makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. And
Most
Mr.
of your
Jeffers?
Yes.
Most of your athletes don't want to use anything anyway, and that's the reason they're playing sports, and that's the reason they're in the band. Most of them that are probably using drugs are not doing any of the above because they don't want to be tested. So if we had a testing program for everybody, you would have a deterrent for everybody rather than just a select group.
Mr. Edwards just took the words right out of my mouth. I've never understood this since I've been on this board for almost 4 years. Why are we selecting only athletes? And now we're talking about looking at FFA members and DECA Club and this, that, and the other. Why not have a random drug policy that would, for all students? You know, whatever your alphabet this week might be, you might get called out. I mean, again, that would deter anyone from using drugs in the school.
Probably the cleanest answer I can give, and I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on Monday nights with school boards, but the cleanest thing is there's been a number of Supreme Court and state Supreme Court and state court rulings, but mainly Supreme Court rulings from 95 to 2002, which have delineated, here's the parameters that you're allowed to test students in schools. All students have access to education, but it's basically, this is a search, and even the very lenient standard the schools have of reasonable suspicion does not apply to blanket random searches of entire student population. They have allowed that for metal detectors and for that type of thing, but there hasn't been a case that wouldn't prohibit you guys from doing that, but there wouldn't be no one has done that before.
Right.
It only applied to like extracurricular activities such as students driving to school,
Right.
Yes, sir.
athletes, or other type extra things versus the basic education.
That's right.
And I think that's what we went with the last time.
Yes, sir.
And that policy was removed. You've done some research, you put together a policy, I call it Mr. Jeffries' policy.
No, don't.
And now, hopefully, through our safety committee, they can go through it with you and
Yes, sir.
get a draft that our attorney will approve, and that way we can get back on track
That'd
to
be-
have any policy that was taken away.
That's
Question. If you had a policy wherein that if a youngster were caught to be using or have used and you suspended them, would that still be considered to be negative on their grade? As long as it doesn't get above 10?
Actually, in that case, whatever school board assigned penalties apply. So yes, it can. A lot of people, there's a lot of correlations between out-of-school suspension and negative correlation to grades. So one could certainly argue that if we suspend students from school for being under the influence, that we're harming their ability to be successful in school, but that's never been, no one stopped that from happening. Nope, if a kid's found guilty or in possession of drugs or under the influence of drugs, they're suspended from school, 10 days recommended from panel perhaps, and the education services are provided as we are able, or the board dictates.
Maybe that would be one way of attacking it, so that it wouldn't look like that we are going after their grade if you suspend them. I think it would be an argument. I think that could be a way of getting around Because whatever we do, it needs to be fair to all students.
Well, part of this whole drug testing thing, many people don't agree with having a drug testing policy. There are people out there that believe students should not be tested. Same people believe that when you come into a school, you shouldn't have metal detectors. That's an opinion. But the background on the drug testing policy was for students who are participating, it started with sports, so that other students aren't high on different drugs that can cause injury to themselves or others. It morphed into student drivers because it's not a right to drive to school, it's a privilege. So it covered that. So it covered all the extracurricular activities. So when students, for example, band, I don't know whether or not if a student comes up positive on a drug test in band, it should be understandable that he's suspended from the band activities, not the actual classroom. So when you said it would impact a grade, it's two different things, especially if a school would look at it that way. So,
But they get grades for the activities.
yeah, but if they are suspended from competition, then there has to be another way so they can keep their grades. And, you know, many studies have been done and people have attacked, and they looked at every excuse they can possibly think of to kill the drug testing policy. For example, talking about kids having grades impacted. That's been put out there to reduce the pool of applicants. Like I said, a lot of people don't want the policy, and they look for every example they can to poke a hole in it, to kill it. But there are some positive things about a drug testing policy to protect kids. We had a young man that was on his board that said if it wasn't, he said, if we had a drug testing policy, we probably wouldn't have a football team. So some kids can use that when the peer pressure is on them saying, smoke this or take this. They can use that, hey, we have a drug testing policy. I want to play sports. So it's something that kids can use as well, even though there's a lot of opposition about it, and people will use every excuse to kill it. I think it's a positive thing. I look forward to seeing what the safety committee is going to come back with. But this is just an example. We had a policy, it was removed. I hope to see another policy, and I'm confident that it will be attacked because some people really don't believe it should be a policy. I'm strongly supportive of it because I've seen the impact, the positive impact it's had on kids because we have too many children that are using, and if a random drug testing policy will deter them from using drugs, I think that's a positive thing.
I agree.
I think a part of the critical issue that we need to keep in mind is the idea that this is random. Any teacher or administrator who is of an opinion from the behavior of a child can actually use a drug test kit because there is suspicion of drug activity or alcohol activity. That's fine, and it would have consequences that has been mentioned in our policy. This is a way of looking at random drug testing, which is a search, basically a search. That's where we've been running into issues with the courts upholding these types of things, and it was important for us to go back and make sure that the policy that we have, because we do agree we need a policy, but it's important to make sure that it will stand up if someone were to challenge it in a court of law, and that we would have done everything necessary, knowing that what was accepted in 2004 is no longer accepted because of court cases that have not passed the test of time. So it's a long policy, as you can see. It's long because we've had to make sure that we can clear it and be able to work with it. And that's again why, even questions about do the swabs that we had currently been using, are they working? There was doubt on the parts of those who were using the swabs that they were working. And so do we move from the swabs to urine tests? There's pros and cons to either one. But we are of the opinion that it would be good to have, I think the safety committee is the perfect one to do so because they've had some experience typically from their work against police officers to be able to come in and help give some guidance with Brad to Mr. King, our attorney, to be able to come back with the one that's going to be effective with what we're trying to do, at the same time protect the board and the school systems from potential litigation in the future.
Okay. So if any board member has a recommendation, just pass that through the safety committee.
Sir.
And that'll be the,
You were talking about the band, et cetera. if we could come up with some type of punishment if they were tested for drugs that would not affect the student's grade.
Okay.
We could suggest that, and it was still could be included as a general test. Okay.
Got you,
That's
got you.
They don't get a blue ribbon, they have to get a red one.
Okay.
That's why it says suspension.
All right.
Just don't smoke down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and speaking of policy, we still have some work to do on regular policy. Ms. Alga's going to bring us up to date on some things for your consideration as well.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and Mr. Nichols. I have for you this evening consideration of VSBA policies, and we are looking specifically at sections B, F, G, J, and K. And just starting with just a general overview, we are going to be deleting some of these policies that have just gone out of date, and I'll explain some of these as we go through them, and then adding some language, especially here in section B. So beginning with policy BBBB, that has been suspended previously, and so we just would like to delete that policy. That's the recommendation. Policy BCB is school board officers, and it was brought to my attention that we have a parliamentarian as an officer of the board, but is not included in policy. So it's highlighted in that policy for your review. And then policy BCE, it's highlighted with the committees. We had not included the list of committees that the board has for that policy as well. For section F, because of our facilities that we are working with, I thought that policy section needed to be updated completely. So everything else other than what you see right here is current, and these are the most current VSBA policies for facilities development. For policy G, support staff grievances, that is a policy update. GBMAR, that's a regulation that was in place prior to GBMA being updated. So this policy, the regulations, those are outdated. So they have been incorporated in the policy for GBMA. So we're asking to delete those procedures. GCA, local licenses for teachers, the General Assembly has deleted that route to licensure. So that policy is no longer current or should remain in the policy manual. The VSBA is sending out GCDA because of typographical errors that they made. And then for policy GCI, for professional staff assignments and transfers, we're recommending option 1, which I have provided for you, and deleting option 2. And then we also have JGD, JGE, which is student suspensions and expulsion, and that is changing the procedures. We had approved, or the board had approved, the school board option, and we had approved the disciplinary option. We needed to approve the school board option. So they also had updated that, so you have that policy for consideration. And finally, section K is an update for service animals in public schools, just procedure changes, recommendations of VSBA. Anyone have any questions for me?
Will we be voting on these next meeting?
Yes, this is information only this evening. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Alga.
Thank you.
Okay, policy, that's what the board lives by is policy. But we are also excited because we're working on the development of new secondary schools. And so I'm going to ask Brooke if she will pull up for an update on the middle school, high school complex. Since the Board of Supervisors approved the budget of $120 million, and they had some drawings that were given to them and to you as we looked at that information. And then they also approved the purchase of the land where the new school would be going. We have been working on making the drawings correct for the needs that we have. So if we move to the next slide, you will see renderings that basically show the proposed first floor plans by the August 2018 drawings of the architects which were based on the Department of Education recommendations about space per pupil population. You will remember that when we talked to the Board of Supervisors about the need to expand, one of the things that we talked about was moving from a population for the middle school that would hold our current population of 1,100 to add 200, and then for our high school to move from 1,300 to 1,500. A significant reason for that request, although we certainly look to grow, but a significant reason for that request is that the guidelines that the State Department of Education gives for space requirements was severely limiting to us as we were particularly considering the importance of the career centers that we have to work with. And we were finding that we were stymied in being able to put what we already have in place, much less addition to other career programs, in the space that was required, and yet for planning purposes as far as the Board of Supervisors were concerned, they were being given information that was based only on that data for the development of a budget. Well, we are thankfully successful in being able to get the budget of $120 million altogether with all the components involved, but we had, with that knowledge, specific information of knowing we were going to need to come back and make adjustments to what was just a simple plan based on numbers of rooms that would be involved. So there has been considerable conversation with business, with administration, with some teachers, with various members of the school board committee on how to best place the classrooms, where to place classrooms, what spaces are needed for the career centers, and how we are going to make the best use of space for such things as the creative programs that would be surrounding the auditorium for band, for chorus, for theater. How are we going to use the space that's required related to the SRO officers, where they would be placed through the building, where safety features would go. We're talking about where cameras will go with the safety committee. We've had the local police involved in working with us on other components related to that. And so the program or the rendering that you see on the right side of the screen is basically where we are in making some recommendations for those updates to meet the size, to meet the space that we need related to it. This is not, at this point, it's not a done deal, because obviously there needs to be more input from teachers. There needs to be more input from the local police department. There needs to be input from maintenance. There needs to be input from you in the committee structure that we've worked with. So we have some time to be able to continue to work on this. At one point, Mr. Upton had given hope that the board would have, we would have had enough information so that at this meeting tonight, we could basically have an approval of a basic floor plan so that they could go ahead and move forward with others. Because it takes time from even what we suggest to get back to the architects and put that in drawing form, he has come back and said that we can have that vote on accepting that at the December meeting. So we're looking at taking what we have now, coming back to the committees so that they can have input, so that they can talk about what needs to be in place. We're going back to the schools. We're going to be talking with teachers. We're going to be getting teacher input again. Teacher input has been very important. The calendar committee is going to be meeting. We're talking about schedules that will best meet the needs of the students as they're working on the career centers. You'll see significant addition to the career center placement of various parts of this. So we have basically another month to be able to work on these options to get a floor plan in place that the architects can continue to work on it. And so this is just where we are now with continuous input from you all. As we move to the next floor.
Will these be passed out to the board members for us to
we
look at?
will be able to get copies to all the board
Because I
members.
can't see it. I can't read a single thing.
Can we
up
get
there.
digital also?
We'll get digital, yes, yes. This, well, that just came in today.
Will we be able to get a copy of these?
Yes, yes. You know, again, it's a continuous work in progress at this point. This is using the same plan for first and second floor. The second floor hasn't changed as much as the first floor, other than identifying what some of the classrooms would technically be. The Department of Education has tended to go toward a plan for high school that basically filters classrooms throughout, science classrooms, social studies classrooms throughout the building. Our teachers recommended that we keep our schools departmentalized at the secondary level, and so one of the biggest plans that we have here now is showing that the departments are on the floors together, English, social studies, science, and so forth. One of the reasons for that is the teachers have been most anxious to be able to remain in their classrooms as much as possible. This is going to give them that option to be able to do that. So, again, this is a work in progress. We'll be going back to the schools looking to get teacher input on these types of things, and yours. And yes, there will be copies of this made available to all of you digitally, and we can print out a large copy for any of you that would want one as well for us to be able to work with and come back to. Thus far, we've had the instructional committee, the capital improvement committee, and the safety committee that have worked together in committee form. We're looking to get the athletic committee and others. The gifted committee, I know, is working sometime soon to be having some conversations about this. And that's the best way for us to work right now, in small groups, and be able to then come together. When on our December meeting is, I can't think of the date right now, but that's on Monday night in December, the 17th. On probably the evening of the 12th before that, or 14th before that, we will ask for a special meeting for you all to come together and see what has come from the various groups, the committees and the teachers, as we've worked with it, with some final recommendations, and have you all be able to, even at that point, make some final recommendations before there's a vote on a plan for the architects to move forward with going beyond that. I think there's one more page to look at. This is the site plan. There have been some modifications to the site plan as well that have been recommended in conversations with the athletic directors and some others. We'll have a chance to continue to work on some of those. One particular point that I want to give to you is the road. I don't know if you can tell. The road entrance right in here has changed significantly for where the buses and the teachers will be coming in. And that's because we've had an offer from the landowners right in here to be able to purchase this land that's come up. And you have a vote tonight to work with me on working with the landowners to be able to work that out. That differs dramatically from what we had originally thought. We might have to have this very strong curve right in here. We'll now, if the board approves and we're able to work this out, we'll be able to come right in, and instead of having a circle, it'll come right straight in for the buses to be able to come through. So that's an immediate issue that comes up. For those of you that are on that end, that's this piece of property right in this area. So I will be asking for you to give a vote on that tonight as we've had a conversation. But there's other things on this that we will be continuing to work on, and you work with us on that piece. But it's an update as we have been working on it now, and I'm open for any questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I have many. The first of which, how many times have the teachers been able to meet with the architect? How many group sessions have they had to meet to help design their classroom space?
There have been a couple. There haven't been many at this point, but we had to get through some of the components related to what we would have to work with budget before we could come back and work with them in much detail.
What about our building administrators, our principals and our assistant principals? How many workshops have they had to give input on the space that they think they might need?
Building administrators have had a chance to look at the plan, talk about the plan, come back I can't give you an exact figure. I haven't been a part of all of those meetings myself with other things going on, but there have been several meetings with them, and they've even also had a chance to go and tour schools to see what similar-sized schools that have been built recently have been working on.
And I guess with looking at the drawings that, the teachers, especially because they're in the rooms with the classrooms with the students all day, and the building administrators, since in the buildings all day, that they would be key people in designing the space and floor plan. So, y'all have come a long way. It seems like they've only had maybe one and a half or two meetings in designing the space.
Well, certainly, I agree with you that it's been key, they're a key part in the whole thing. And the time limitations is a part of the issue, and of course, they're teaching as well. So we're very anxious to get out and work with them on that.
All right, and also, the original drawing that we saw, there was a barn on the site, which I don't see.
The barn is right there.
Where is the barn? I'm sorry, I don't see it.
Right there.
Where the red dot is.
Oh, I thought it was a pond.
No,
Okay.
that's the barn.
Does it say future?
Is
in
it
front
future
of it?
barn or is it barn?
No, we'll be having a barn. We've even, with the safety committee, had a discussion about the importance of that from the safety as a backup.
Okay, and then also I don't see a football field for the middle school side that was on the original design.
Well, there's a field here for practice, but that's part of the conversation we're having about the opportunity to be able to use this field for multiple options. I mean, nothing's been decided. There's somewhat of a redundancy possibly here, and having track for middle and high school this close together. When we looked at some of the other schools, we've seen that they did not have two, they had one. So we're looking, space is money, things are money, so that's part of the conversation we have to have.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes, sir.
You said nothing's been decided, but it's been removed.
Well, it's so that people can have a clear vision of what we're looking at. That's why we have two maps side by side, so we can see, what are some of the options that we would be able to work with. We're always making some recommendations, and then we go back and look and see what we can or should go back to or move forward with.
And for convenience, and I guess for saving money, it would be easy to remove a middle school track and simply say with a concept that they can share it at the high school. But anyone that deals with middle school track, just say example, Bluestone, the middle school kids go to the high school, and it's a mess. It's not enough space. So now we're going to consolidate two schools. It's going to be a greater mess. It looks on paper, and I know you say you've had conversation with athletic directors, but it really needs to be considered. And is it based on the overall project, we have to cut back to fit it within the budget of $120 million?
We have been given a basis of $120 million to work with.
And I've also been told that part of that $120 million includes the sewer that has to come out of our $120 million?
The budget that was given to the Board of Supervisors in trying to move forward with additional funding included $5 million, up to $5 million for the sewage system that was involved.
So
Yes.
So you're looking at a budget of 115 if you're going to say $5 million for sewage.
Just for the school part. I mean, all of those things, the purchase of this land was not a part of any original budgeting that we did. We purchased this land, and now we're seeing, for the purposes of safety, it would be my recommendation that we purchase this land rather than coming up into this area, as you'll see. That was something that will have to come out of the 120 that was given.
But we as a board has the ability to request that that be a separate item.
You could-
Because if you're saying $5 million, we can always ask.
You can always ask.
If we accept $5 million, I see why middle school football field and track has been removed, and you shift certain things to fall within a $5 million gap. It is my opinion, and it'd be the pleasure of the board, of course, the board would have to make the decision, to ask that the supervisors, because that sewage line is simply just taking crap from Route 4 to Boynton. And as a taxpayer, we talk about maximizing, what can we do this one time to get it right for our kids? Do we want to have $5 million allotted for a sewage line, or would we have that $5 million to be put in infrastructure at the new school? Maximizing space, because we always talk about we should build it larger than what we need for expansion. And some of the other CTE programs and those type things we need. So I think it's important that we ask that that be a separate item, and whether or not they can allocate funding, because it's going to benefit everybody on that 58 corridor
Yes.
that can now tap into a sewage line. So I don't think we should spend $5 million. I think we should have the full 120 for the building site. But to take $5 million for a crap pipe to go from Route 4 to Boynton, I would just like the board to ask for that money to come from a different source versus the 120.
Well,
I totally
is this all hearsay, or have they told us?
I've got
that?
the-
Paul
Paul
said-
says there, the numbers are here. I got the numbers. The Capital Improvement Committee, I called the Director of Finance for the Board of Supervisors. He sent me the piece of paper that they used to vote on, and the superintendent has a copy of that tonight. It says $5 million. Well, let me explain something to you. I also talked to some people on the Water Authority, and when they put the water from Boynton to Chase City with one pumping station, it's $1 million a mile. So if you count how many miles it is from Boynton back to, from Route 4 back to Boynton, $5 million is not going to cover it either. It's all blue sky. When we had a meeting about 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't an official meeting, but we had a meeting, and I asked to get the engineers to put us a cost on items so that we can, so you know the trade-offs. You know if you're going to get rid of a football field, is that $1 million, and what are we going to do with that million over here? And I wanted to see that also on a sewer line. If these engineers come in and say, hey, oh, by the way, you need 6 pumping stations, it's going to be $12 million, now we're going to choke up down here. But I don't want to choke up after we start bidding the process. I want to choke up now. We need to know ahead of time for planning, because right now, we're using square footage prices that are based on schools that are being built all over the East Coast. And that really doesn't tell us, because maybe they don't have to pump sewage at that school, and maybe they don't have other issues that we may encounter.
Well, I agree with Mr. Edwards. I mean, again, early on, it was transparent, and I told Mr. Nichols, I've told several of the board members, I've kept a huge binder since we started this process. Every newspaper article, everything that was related to this new school, and sewage was quoted by the Board of Supervisors on 2 different occasions, economic development. Why is Mecklenburg County Public Schools have to pay for sewer for other businesses? And next thing is, who's going to maintain the daggone thing once it's fixed?
I agree, but that $5 million you got, we were at $100 million when they talked about giving us the sewer line. Now they gave us $120 million and threw the sewer line in. So it's like which nut is the pea?
Well, I mean,
Well, that's my concern, is we had a drawing for $100 million that everybody was tickled with, until the barn wasn't in it, an auxiliary gym, a wrestling room, and a bigger auditorium.
and an extra football field.
Well, no, the football field was already there, because that was the drawing over here. We went to the Board of Supervisors and said, we need $13 million to add those 4 items. And if I'm wrong, somebody correct me, because I don't want to be misquoted.
Also
So-
include extra CTE space, the 13.
Okay, and extra CTE space. Well, they gave us the $13 million. But half of the things that we told them it was going to be used for are not on the drawings. The auxiliary gym is not there, right?
That's correct.
And the barn, you say, is on there, and that must have changed in the last week, because it was future when the last ones I seen. Is the architect designing a barn to be built at the same time, is my question.
When we went to the Board of Supervisors with this information, the architect's drawing for the barn over on this side
It was It was too expensive.
was one that was built by standards for classrooms and everything in place.
Yeah, and we decided we didn't need that.
And, well, we didn't decide that we didn't need a barn, we decided that we didn't need
Didn't
one
need
that
the
was,
classrooms,
that was,
yeah.
that had all of that. And what the Board of Supervisors basically said was, we do want to come in, we know we're going to have a barn. That's never been a question, but we think we will be in a position to work with the school system to put in the right barn that we need for the program as we're doing the rest of the work, but not necessarily make it a part of the building project that would be with the rest of the building.
So it's not on these plans.
It's not one that's being designed by the architects, but it will, they are, as I think all of you know, the agricultural program is one of the most important ones to the members of the Board of Supervisors, and they have made a commitment to work with us on getting a barn in place.
And that's my only concern, is that they're going to say, we gave you $13 million, and part of that was the barn. So y'all suck it up, and that's what I'm concerned with. And the auxiliary gym, I mean, like Glenn was saying, what trade-off did we get for cutting the gym out?
Sewer line.
Well,
Well, I
no,
think-
That's what I'm saying.
I mean,
I thought they were going to pay that. That
But
was
if
my
you listen,
understanding.
it was $100 million, and we needed 113.
Yeah.
So they gave us 113 plus 7 that we didn't ask for, and then told us we had to pay for the sewer line. So that's the same thing. They can either give us $113 million and pay for the sewer line, or tell us 120 and y'all got to pay $7,000 for sewer line.
$7 million.
To me, that works out in my mind, and I may be wrong. But I mean,
I
you know-
hate for the school system to be in the sewer line business.
Well, I
We
do
don't know the
too.
truth about it.
I do too,
Because that's
but-
an unknown number. We have no idea what that's going to cost.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just the way I see it, and I may be wrong, but.
And again,
I have,
I mean, again, we haven't even started really building the thing. We've taken out green spaces and taking out this and taking out that. I just wish it was more transparent for the last 3.5
Well, he has,
months.
to, he has to come up with something to propose.
If I may.
He can't just come here with a blank piece of paper for his proposal. He has to propose something, so then you can say, I want a green space, or I don't want a green
Right,
space.
but-
He has to come up with
Look,
something.
Mr. Ritchie, I understand that, but I also understand that teachers have only met maybe one time, a little time, and they're the ones that have to be in this building all day, along with our administrators. We only got one time to get this right, so that's my question.
Well, then we're going to have to postpone building a school then until we get it right.
Yeah,
I
get
have, I
that
have
too,
two
but
comments to
we got
make.
30 days.
I have two comments to
architects that
make.
design schools for a
Mr.
living.
Chairman,
Right.
Okay.
I have two comments to make. One, I'd like to propose, or I'd like to offer a suggestion to the administration, central office, that they call in their administration, discuss this with them, give them time to discuss it among themselves, and then get back with them to see their comments. The second thing is, I'd like to know what happened to the original plan, as I made that comment in the first meeting that I attended. What was so wrong with the first plan that we had, that we were saying 100, if we get the 120, in which we did, million, that it would take care of? Then we come back and we start taking out. So what happened to the money that was set aside for the building as it was in the beginning?
Can we go back to that drawing?
You're not going to know anything till you bid it. It's all guesswork, I promise you. The cost of construction goes up every day.
Okay, here we are.
This is one of the drawings that was the original that we were
Correct,
looking at.
correct.
Okay, so that was built, that was put together by the architects very quickly based on, as we put in here, simply looking at space by pupil population. And it was a rendering to give us a general idea of where the middle school would be, where the high school classes would be, where the career center focus would be, the flow that we would have moving from the middle school through to the high school, where we would be able to put the auditorium and the gyms and the cafeterias, where the students would come in, that were being driven in, visitors would come in. You'll notice in that there's a huge space right here that's open, that was unused at all. and there's classrooms, but there's no real identification on classrooms. They're simply looking at putting those things at this point in place in order to be able to give the school board and to be able to give teachers and others and to be able to give the Board of Supervisors a general sense of how the architects would recommend putting a building generally together to meet the needs of what we had talked about at that time, and with the space amount that would be available for the $100 million. And basically, they said, you will remember, they said, we can't build everything that's needed for the budget that you're giving us. You know, in all reality, the process, and I'm thankful for the Board of Supervisors for opening the doors for the process, because certainly we needed it. But had the process been done as recommended, we would have been designing what we needed all along at the beginning, and then taken that to the Board of Supervisors to say, this is what we need for our schools. Will you give us the funding for it, and cut back from that? Instead, we had to work it out so that we get a general plan from the architects. And to be honest with you, to get this much out of the architects without having a commitment of where the building would go and having planned anything more than a general conversation with teachers and business people about what we were looking for was a risky venture on their part. They knew that they had been selected, but there was so much that was unknown at that point. So really, until we had the vote in September for what would be the placement of the school, and that we would get $120 million, basically, to be able to work with for all the components that the Board of Supervisors are willing to work with us on, that's when we really are able to take this. And we knew we'd have to take this drawing and say, okay, where do classrooms go? What do we need for the different components that would need to go into this for ours? Because this is very general. This space in particular was wide open with nothing in it. It had to be there because of the classroom space we need here. We need to, have conversations about lockers. How many lockers? Are we going to be having wide enough hallways for the students to be able to traverse without bumping into one another, which was one of our concerns about that? We knew we were going to need to come back to the safety committees and others and make some recommendations about that. So at that point, this is in September, we're teaching, we're having weather issues and things of that nature, but we needed to come back. And most everybody that looked at it looked at this space and said, that's just wasted space right there. How do we build our administrative wing, our counselor wing, our opportunities for the SROs? Where do we put the classrooms? The teachers had said they wanted to have a chance to be departmentalized, and so how are we going to work this out so that it's departmentalized as opposed to otherwise? And we have had conversations with the teacher advisory committee, with administrators. We've had the administrators come in and look at it. I mean, I'm sure they want to look at it some more. We all do. But one of the things that we recognize is this is a perfect space to put materials that we need, as you can see. But if we're going to one of the things the architects continue to say to us is, if we're going to fill that space was going to take us beyond what we had money allotted to be able to do.
I guess I was misled. I thought when we presented that first proposal to the Board of Supervisors and were requesting money, that was going to be basically the plan that we go with. Now, I'm not as concerned about the space in the front foyer and doing away with that or being used for something else as I am the fields and the gyms. I know what these athletes need when they are going to practice in the afternoon, and we're trying to get the youngsters home at a reasonable time. Rather than to have them try and share, you got 2 teams of boys at the middle school, 2 teams of girls, same thing at the high school, and then to try and push all of that into a small gamut, I think we're asking for trouble.
Well, we certainly can look to move back.
It's something else you have to look at. The reason you got one field over there rather than the other field is because the architect basically said if we could sacrifice one of those fields, we could probably pick up enough money to put turf on the other one and make it a professional playing field, just like Chesterfield County, Henrico County, and all the major schools are doing, and it cuts the maintenance. If you look at our maintenance department right now, they can't maintain, they're gonna have a hard time maintaining the schools. I mean, we've got to build some money in there for maintenance, and that's not built into the budget for the future either. We just will build a school and then we can't maintain it. Then what are we going to do? I mean, we've got a lot of thinking to do. I mean, as a board, we need to really think about this. If we miss this boat, we're in trouble for a long time.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Nichols, we as a board, we're seeing this for the first time tonight. And I know there have been committee meetings to come up with these ideas and concepts prior to those things getting put into the drawing.
Right.
Had we as a board been updated at each stage, it would have made this process a little clearer for us. But when we come in and we see these changes brought through committee that has been put forth to an architect that's done a drawing, is causing some confusion. And that's why we have so many questions at a regular school board meeting. This probably should have been a separate meeting altogether, just to update us after every committee before it's drawn, because you just said it costs money to fill that space. And when you put the additional funding there, it takes away from something else, which ultimately this board and no committee has to vote on. So if we go through this process of making all these changes, and then it's brought to the board and the board says no, then we're going to be in a bad situation. So I think we as a board need to be brought up on when a committee meets and there's a major change, and I consider these major changes. Mr. Palmer just said, he's been an administrator. He knows that we need space. But when you take space to compensate for something else, a committee may have a perspective, an athletic committee may have a perspective, but the board is going to look at the whole picture and say yay or nay. That wasn't done. So
You're right, and I'll apologize to the board. I was thinking that using the committee structure would be a way that would keep us from having to meet.
But
'cause we've had-
committees
this
don't
is-
make policy, or the committee doesn't vote. The committee
That's
makes
correct.
recommendations, and the board has to vote to make it a reality.
The committee does a lot of the legwork to bring this stuff to the board.
But when was it brought?
This is the first time I've
Just
seen
now
it.
doing it. That's the first time I've seen it too.
Well, that's the point.
But,
Right.
I mean, but
it's
there
not like
were,
somebody else, they just delivered it to.
Right, we asked
Well,
them
in
to do this
fairness,
so they
in-
all could look at it. That's the only thing we said. These were-
as an explanation, the meeting, the one that the various committees have seen were updated. There have been several renderings along the way after committee meetings that have updated some of the material in here. We've had multiple drawings that have come in after we've had committee meetings with some thoughts about some of the things to be able to look at. I've taken some of the drawings out to individual board members to be able to show them and to say where we are. But I'll be happy to, every time we have a conversation about, and I don't mean that to be facetious, not every time we have a conversation, but at critical points along the way, I'll be happy between now and December to call a special meeting for us to discuss those points.
And you just took it right out, because you all are looking for us to vote on these plans next month to keep the time in check. I just think it would have been more transparent had we done it along the way. We can't look back and do it now, but y'all are asking us, this board, to vote on something that's going to be long up after I'm way dead and gone. So the transparency part of it would have been a little bit better, I think.
We've been on a tight schedule since we started. I mean, we
I
started
agree.
spitting this thing out every month, something happening.
I agree.
And what needs to happen now is we need to be able to, each one of us take this home and look at it and study it and see what we don't like or what we do like, and then call a special meeting and come back together. We may have to do this 3 or 4 times before December to get this done. We need to do it as a group. We don't need to do it as committees. I agree. I've been on this school board 15 years, and I've never believed in committees, because you can't get 9 people to agree on everything, and you never know which way it's going to go. So the best thing to do is everybody get together in a room, hash it out, make a decision. Let's build something. I've been on these committees for 23 years, and we haven't broke ground yet. But let's all get together and figure out what we need. If this is not it, let's fix it and go on. We need to go now. Because if we don't, we're not going to be in there in 2.5 years.
Well, I said, one of the things I sent out to everybody was that to decide tonight how you wanted to proceed, whether it was work sessions or whatever. So if we want to start scheduling work sessions, that's fine. I just want what everybody else wants, whatever's going to keep this moving.
Well, if everybody's happy being all together, let's do that.
All right.
And then we don't have to talk about committees anymore. We're all in a room together. We can all be presented at the same time. We can make decisions, right or wrong, and move on. That way, nobody can say, I didn't like it, I didn't do it. We picked a land by consensus, and that's where we are. So now we need to design a school and do the same thing. And if it takes 3 more meetings, we just have to make sure we're here, because this is $120 million of taxpayers' money we're spending, and I don't want to be the one who makes a mistake.
I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll schedule meetings.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you. All right. We do have in your packet recognition that unlike the past several years, we have several conflicts with our board meeting dates in the upcoming year. And so we're asking that you consider making some potential changes to meeting dates for the new year. The information is there, and we're not making a decision on it tonight, but I do want you to be thinking about that as we move forward.
Right, and so not only the dates being moved, but also the organizational meeting, whether we want that to be a separate meeting or part of our January meeting, which I'm indifferent to.
Right.
So what you guys can
That's
give
something
input
to
on that.
consider for December as well.
All right, so we'll vote on that in December, but be thinking about these, how to work around these conflicts and our organizational meeting.
Well, the one in April is probably the major one, because the others could be moved to a Tuesday. But since they're on spring break the whole week, we'd have to change it a week, either a week before or a week after.
All right, we'll be thinking about that, and we'll come back.
So are we to email you with our preferences, or how would you suggest we get back?
Why don't you email me, and then I'll get with Paula, and we'll,
Talk about it in one of our 12 work sessions.
that's right, then we'll have another work. So we'll get that, I don't think it should be that difficult. Like Doris said, we'll move one by a week, we'll switch some to Tuesday, and we'll be done with it. It doesn't have to be a big involved process. But yeah, if you would send me your simple solutions to these little issues, we'll get this done in the books.
And then there's a couple of items just to bring to your attention. We had the training for the vape and jewel issue that we have. I think the presentations were wonderful. They were not well attended by the public, but the presentations were very good. Since then, the federal government has taken care of a little bit of the jewel issue, because they've come down pretty hard by federal government standards on that, stating that they would no longer be available for sale in convenience stores. I don't know what impact that's going to have on us with that or not, but we also have got access to the Narcan for our nurses at the high school at no cost, so that's a good opportunity for us as well. I'd like to have a board member work with us on the marketing plan. We've got our marketing for the new schools. We have teachers and the marketing teachers and art teachers that are going to be working on the names selection for the new colors, the new name for the school, the icon, the mascots and things like that. You know, I'd like to have a member to work with me on that. You can make a decision on how to identify someone to help with that part. It's going to be a big community type of thing.
I'll send something.
I also want to point out in your material, you've got information on a grant that we were selected for from the UVA to work on some curriculum opportunities for our pre-K programs. That pre-K is a huge focus of the legislature this year and of the Department of Education, and we're one of 3 school divisions in Region 8 that was selected to be a part of that grant program. We're excited about that, and Ms. Rogers in particular is working with our elementary schools on that piece. And then just an update on the school board's conference. I thought it was very well attended. It was very well done. Was really pleased with the focus that we saw over and over again on the workforce development component, which has been a huge part of our whole piece. I think showing that we have been ahead and working with the new building and with our plans for that. So I felt it went well, and as we have the individual remarks from each of the members, they may have something to say about that further. But that's for tonight.
All right, we'll move on to our committee reports. Does the Joint Education Capital Improvement Committee have a report?
I think we said it all.
All right. The Finance Committee.
Yes, sir. The Finance Committee met today at 5, and we have 2 recommendations, one regarding bills, and then another recommendation to ask the Board of Supervisors to appropriate our new loan so that it can be spent. Thank you.
All right. The Safety Committee?
Yeah, we had a meeting about the new school, and basically, for transparency purposes, it was just camera placement and possible structural things for the fire department to come in and things like that. But we have made the Safety Committee has made no recommendations as far as the structure of the building.
Right. Well, I appreciate your work on that. That's what you're supposed to do. Gifted, Talented Committee?
Oh.
Do we have, do we have anything? Well, me too, but I'm looking your way.
Governor School, I have the minutes, the director's report from the last Governor School meeting, and I do want to point out that we had a student, Mr. Cody Campbell, placed, highest individual for small schools in a chemistry exam. He also was part of the team awards at this chemistry society test. And Alberta was chosen as one of the schools to get the school award. So we would like to congratulate Mr. Cody Campbell, who is son of Mr. Rob Campbell, our school board member.
All right.
So that was a competition among all governor schools statewide?
Yes.
And he had the highest score in the state for the small school
For
division?
the individual and the team award.
He didn't get it from me.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Ms. Garner. The Athletics Committee?
We've concluded with volleyball and football. Both teams competed well. Then we're into basketball and track. Hopefully I'm not forgetting one. I thought it was interesting with the Coast Guard, with the boater education. A while back, we tried to implement what we call an outdoor education curriculum. Ms. Jackwell, you may remember that one. And that was boater, hunter ed, archery. And with the Coast Guard coming on board, hopefully we can get those other 2 pieces going, which is the hunter ed and the archery, because we do have the archery. I think Ms. Height had mentioned it before. We still have the equipment, but it takes some planning for that NAS program. We do have the fishing team. We have 3 teams that have qualified for state. We have another fishing tournament at Smith Mountain Lake. Hopefully we can get another couple of teams qualified. We have middle school teams and high school teams qualified. We do have fishing equipment still at the schools. So these programs are really jumping, and appreciate it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Instruction Committee? We met with go ahead.
We met and discussed some of the things that we have discussed tonight about the coming up to the school or building up the schools, but nothing major that reaches out to me.
Okay. And now we are at the public input session. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to speak?
We do.
Okay.
At this time, matters may be publicly brought to the attention of the school board and administration. Public comment at board meetings are just one of many avenues for communication, and the board recognizes and appreciates the importance of input from and communication with the public we represent. The public is invited to sign up to speak. The clerk of the school board will write down your name, contact information, and the topic that you wish to speak about. The public is allowed up to 6 minutes at most meetings to express their views. Please respect that time limitation. It will be enforced. Please understand that it may not be possible to immediately respond to questions. As a reminder, it is inappropriate at a public meeting to make personal attacks, to be defamatory, or to disparage individuals or identifiable groups. Again, we welcome and appreciate your input. Prior to beginning your comment, please state your name to the school board. I have Bridget Branch Busey. No? I guess
we don't have anybody.
we do not have anybody.
All right. Now we'll move on to our action items. In reference to the minutes from the regular school board meeting held October 15th, 2018, do I have a motion that the school board accepts the minutes of the school board meeting held on October 15th, 2018?
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Mr. Sturtevant. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now do I have a motion that the school board approves the payment of the bills?
Mr. Ritchie, the Finance Committee is recommending those bills be paid.
All right, we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee to pay the bills. May I have any discussion on that? May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. May I have a motion that the school board approves the personnel recommendations for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Garner, seconded by Mr. Honeycutt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now, in reference to the Student Matter SD 2018-2019-05, I need a motion that the school board approves a discipline recommendation regarding Student Matter SD 2018-2019-05 to place a high school student at the Alternative Learning Center for the remainder of the fall semester.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Ms. Garner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. In reference to Student Matter SM 2018-2019-06, may I have a motion that the school board, let's see how we want to adjust this. The school board request the parent to reimburse for the cost from the governor's school to the, is that what we're doing?
Fall semester.
For the fall semester only. So we're requesting that the parent reimburse the school system for the fall semester charges that we're charged by this governor's school.
So moved.
So moved.
Sorry about that.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, seconded by Ms. Garner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now may I have a motion that the school board approves the 2018-2019 overnight field trips for Parkview Senior High School?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Sturtevant, seconded by Mr. Honeycutt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. May I have a motion that the school board authorizes the superintendent to negotiate the purchase of additional property for the new school complex?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Palmer, seconded by Mr. Sturtevant. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Reminders, November 21st through the 23rd, it's the Thanksgiving holiday, schools are closed. December 17th will be our regular school board meeting. There will be some announced work sessions in between now and then. The 24th to the 31st will be winter break, school closed. January 1st and 2nd, winter break, schools closed. January 3rd, teacher workday, no school for students. On the 4th, professional development, no school for students. And on January 7th, the students return to school.
Finally.
All right. Board member remarks. Maybe I can start on, Ms. Garner, may I start with you
Yes,
tonight?
you may.
Thank you. Any remarks?
I know some of you have not seen your home since early this morning, so have a nice Thanksgiving. And go home and get a good night's sleep.
Thank you, Mr. Sturtevant.
Happy Thanksgiving. That's all I have.
Mr. Johnson.
Same. Happy Thanksgiving.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes, I just wanted to just express my thanks to everyone for all the jobs that they're doing, and especially to our community partners who are helping us with all the things that we have to do. And also, I just wanted to suggest a speaker for our next convocation, next fall. He was the closing speaker Friday morning, and I can get that information to you, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Edwards?
One quick thing, the partnership deal that the superintendent brought to us with the community is really working. Last year, the Rutens Club, the Rutens are becoming aged. I know I'm one of them. But they put $225,000 to $230,000 back into this community in Clarksville and every year. And when the big school's built, of course, it'll be spread out. But last year, Mr. Sturtevant brought the wrestling team over and helped the people move furniture and do things and got a donation. On Friday night, the football coach actually sent football players over to move furniture before the dance that they have every night. And for doing that, the Rutens have agreed to give $2,500 towards their athletic jackets. And I meant to tell Mr. Sturtevant about that earlier, but I never got to him, but it's
That's a good thing.
you like that, don't you?
I do.
So I just thanks to the Rutens, they're doing a great job. And so are the kids, because the kids volunteered to go do that.
Great. Mr. Palmer?
Sure. Just want to say that we had a great conference down in Williamsburg last week, and I said to Mr. Nichols, I would love for more of us to have been able to hear what is actually going on with some of the school systems around. We are right on key, folks. I'm very proud to say that Mr. Nichols is leading us right down the path that we need to go, I feel. And some of the schools, and one in particular on the East Coast down, is doing exactly what we want to do. And I was very pleased, and they had an outstanding band that performed on Saturday. Not a whole lot of drums as far as, well, let's put it this way, not a lot of instruments other than the drums, but they did a beautiful job. I wish everyone could have heard them.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
Like you said, the conference this year was good. I actually learned a lot. I actually sat in one on our alternative ways for teachers' pay. So I've already put a bug in Mr. Nichols' ear, so I'm going to be bugging him a lot about that, because I think there's more than one way to do things, and rather than that, have a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Just want to say happy Thanksgiving. I also, too, had a great time at the VSBA conference. Got to tell her again this year for the delegate session, which is really neat to see the legislative options that are changing and the direction the DOE and the state is moving and the VSBA is moving. And they are definitely an advocate for public education and getting things done and trying to make sure things are not overlooked. And just wish everybody a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for what you do.
All right, well, I have nothing that hasn't been said already. Mr. Nichols?
Yes, in our finance meeting, we mentioned that we have to vote on the supplemental appropriation as well, and that's not necessarily a part of what we did. So if we can get a vote for approval of the supplemental appropriation, that would be important.
I make, so move.
Second.
What is that now?
Discussion. Discussion.
Yeah. All right, discussion, what is that now?
Ms. Pepper, would you like to come and discuss that for the board?
The $40 million loan that we got in 2018, which came in November 6th, we have to appropriate so that we can spend it beginning January 2019. The Board of Supervisors wants us to spend the 2018 money before we spend the 2017 money, because the 2018 money has a higher interest rate.
So.
So I have to ask the Board of Supervisors to appropriate that money so we can spend it, and I need your approval to ask the Board of Supervisors to appropriate it.
And that was brought to the Finance Committee earlier, and that was a recommendation of the Finance Committee to bring to the full board tonight.
All right, and you had,
I just heard 2017 money.
2017 money was the $50 million we initially, the 2018 was the additional $40 million.
I'm straight.
and the Finance Committee recommended that, so we just,
That is correct, Mr.
so we
Chairman.
just need a roll call on that. We have a recommendation for the Finance Committee to approve Ms. Pepper's request.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes. Now, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right.